area, your local community, which is one of the things I've talked about forever on this show is how do we actually get people engaged in going local? General Flynn talks about local action as a national impact all the time. This is something that I think needs to be explored further, which is why we're bringing on these incredible guests today. You've seen them on my show before, RC and Juliana Ormond. They are a husband and wife team. They're the co-founders of a new organization called Watchmen Action. They've actually been publishing for quite some time. If you follow them on Substack, their sherlock.substack.com is absolutely fantastic. It's a great summation of what's been going on either on a daily basis or weekly. They have great summaries. They stay on top of the news. So if you don't have time to keep up with the daily, sherlock.substack.com is fantastic. But again, they are focused on connecting the minds to the tools and the resources that we need in order to flip the balance of power back to who? We, the people. So joining me now to talk about the Watchmen in action are RC and Juliana Ormond. RC, Juliana, great to see you right now. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an incredible 24 hours since President Trump stood up to the microphone. Did you hear anything that kind of resonated with you last night?
So thank you, Ann, for having us on the show. We're very excited to be here. Yes, actually, I love the fact that he took us out of the UN and the WHO. I mean, now that we're out of the WHO, what's going to happen with, our medical industry, what's happening in the United States of America. So I'm excited about Kennedy being in there and talking about what he's going to do as far as the childhood vaccines are concerned and what we're going to do about the COVID-19 vaccines and what's going to happen next in our country. So he gave me a lot of a feeling of, yes, we're coming back. Everybody is now excited about what's happening. He's America first, two genders, man and woman. That's really important for us right now to be able to say, you know what, it's not about having all this craziness and all these multi-genders. Let's get back to basics.
Do you think that some of the stuff RC he talked about, because he was pretty much going on a rant last night in a positive way about all the incredible stuff that he's done, majoritively has been through executive order. We now need Congress to come in a couple of years when we have a real strong majority to take what he wrote into executive order and put into law. He's been strong on deregulating for every new one. He wants 10 gone, which is basically reflective of what he did the last 4 years he was in office. Do you think that he was highlighting the executive action out of a corporation and then referring to his secretaries of various agencies as well, happy to have you on board, Robert Kennedy Jr., he highlighted Kristi Noem and a few others. But basically, when he was talking to like Cash and Pam Bondi, he was like, great people, good luck. I mean, what does that tell you when he's sort of, addressing these people positively, lifting them up, telling them they're going to do a great job, but kind of good luck? It doesn't sound very like a constitutional republic way to address people that are supposed to be representing we the people.
Interesting observation, Ann. It's great to be back. Thank you for having us on again. It is interesting to hear what Trump said and didn't say. I do want to point out something, and this does tie back to the secretaries. I think what Trump did last night, and we've called balls and strikes on Trump for the last year and a half. When it's right, it's right. When it's wrong, it's wrong. That's what we do as a market research company. What was interesting last night is that he basically called out the Democrat side of the aisle, and he exposed them over and over again. If you look back at the history of the Republic, that was a very Jacksonian type of State of the Union address, where he was just calling out the litany of things that were wrong. And he basically baited the Democrats into looking really, really bad. In essence, he primaried them by saying, Lincoln Riley Act, they didn't stand, they didn't clap. The young man who's now a Secret Service agent, who is terminally ill, God bless him, they didn't stand up, they didn't clap, right? He put the Democrats in a position where they looked silly. Right. And Trump's going to do what he's going to do. Did he go on a rant? Yes. Was it positive? Largely, yes. But I think what's most important that people understand is that he basically just primaried every Democrat in their district, because all that's going to be in the ads for Republican contenders against them is last night and how ineffective they were and how tone deaf they were with their constituents by not getting into action on things where, the Lincoln Riley Act is not a political thing. Right. Okay, that's not a partisan thing. That's a life thing. That's a common sense thing. He really set him up to fail.
I agree. I mean, in the overall take about, the job that he did when he gave that speech was reflected in polls, even done by CBS last night. I mean, look at this. Views of Trump's speech by CBS, 76% approve of the job he did when he got in front of the microphone last night. 23% disapprove. Juliana, do you think that is because it is more reflexive of the fact that Democrats look so bad, or is it that Trump looks so good?
I think it's both. I think America's really waking up to what Trump is doing and how positive it is, but they're really also waking up to what the Democrats have been doing. We are America first. And if you're not America first, you have been called out. Everything that's happened with USAID, we're calling out that they're spending money on things that we don't agree with. You know, we're supposed to be a Judeo-Christian country. What they were doing does not reflect that. What they're doing with the children does not reflect our morals and our values. So I think America is really seeing what the Dems are doing, and they really appreciate the fact that Trump is now reeling in all this rhetoric that has been hurting us as Americans.
Yeah. When it comes to hurting us as Americans, one of the areas that I think we have suffered greatly, and again, it's more of that financial sucking. Forget all the waste, fraud, and abuse that Doge is uncovering now that we didn't even know was going on. But stuff that we did know that was going on and that President Trump called out in his first term was, of course, NATO. I mean, and when you look at the NATO defense spending, that's us, that big blue blob. That is the defense spending of the United States versus, everybody else that's involved in NATO. How should this change? Should we be a part of NATO, RC? Should we scale back? Or what should Trump do? What should America do?
Yeah, I think NATO has gotten so long in the tooth that it becomes difficult to justify, especially when you showed that chart in $860 billion, right? So we're the largest spender. What else is interesting too to me, and I think that Trump's logic of we need to get out of NATO and then come back in if we are under new terms is what we saw when he exposed Zelensky last week, is that you're in a position where Keir Starmer basically said, well, we're going to pull the United States into boots on the ground by using Article 5 of NATO, which requires all NATO members to step up and deliver in the event that NATO as a group decides to take a military action. Inherently dangerous, right? We were talking about this on our Close of Business show last night. Most people do not have a sufficient understanding of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and why Putin was upset in the first place and why he does not want Ukraine. And this was the deal that Bill Clinton did in the 90s, why he does not want Ukraine as a part of NATO, because that would put NATO forces right on his border, which to him, and I think validly to some degree, it is a threat. So I think Trump's saying, look, we're going to reassess because we're paying all the bills and you guys need to pay your fair share. Last time he did that, everybody started stepping up and paying. But I think we need to seriously look at that, because I look at that big number. And as Juliana mentioned last night, we've got veterans in need. We've got more people homeless and struggling in the US than we know what to do with. Yet $860 billion can just go out the door to NATO when we actually need it at home.
Yeah, agree. Again, we've made some directional changes, and apparently now, and this is coming out of the Russian news media, TASS, saying that they recognize that the United States has actually halted sending military supplies to Ukraine. In fact, it's being redirected to the 82nd in Poland. So do you feel that, this sort of overture at this point in time is going to give Putin what he believes he needs in order to say, okay, calmer heads or cooler heads are prevailing. Maybe we're going to back off now and start to just sort of mute ourselves out, back out of this war so that we can come to the table and negotiate some kind of a peace deal?
Yeah, I think so. And, he really said, hey, look, I'm good anytime you want to do this. And it seemed like Zelensky was too, until he tried to squeeze out just a bit more grift before it all goes away. I think what Trump and Vance and the administration are doing is they're squeezing on Zelensky to ensure that he complies with whatever deal they're getting ready to sign. And I think that Russia recognizing that is like, okay, we see that there's something happening here, that we're moving towards an end. And we discussed this last night as well. People don't understand is that Ukraine is the place where all dirty things go to get laundered. And you start to ask yourself the hard question, why do we keep sending money to an effort that is basically losing or stagnant at best? The reason is a lot of the people sending that money have a vested interest in what's happening in Ukraine continuing to happen, including war, because it's like a balance sheet. If somebody loses on one side, somebody gains on the other. Ask yourself the question, who?
That's absolutely right. Well, people there's winners and losers everywhere you go. But as far as from where I'm sitting, the people that have been sitting on the sidelines, right, that have been fomenting sort of the loser mentality are those that haven't stepped into the ring and do what you're supposed to do, which is your civic duty. I mean, this country runs on the backs of the hardworking Americans. The rest of the world sort of lives off the back of the hardworking Americans. And if we were to start really taxing and tariffing everybody around the world, we could potentially just continue to build our own manufacturing infrastructure, and we don't need anybody else at this point. I mean, I might miss the wine and cheese out of France, but at the end of the day, we've got dairy cattle here. And I'll suffer through maybe not a French wine or French cheese, but I think our California wines probably rival. Heck, even North Carolina's got good wineries today. We can learn to live with what we have, which is everything we need right here in this country. So understanding the people's need for civic duty and the fact that we have to engage, roll up our sleeves. You all have embarked on the Watchmen. And this is a boots on the ground boot camp kind of a program. Walk us through what you're doing and why you decided to engage the people in this fashion so that, we can become part of the solution.
So we really understood that there were people that wanted to get involved but didn't know how, people that were involved but they didn't really know how to be involved, right? And then on the other side of the aisle, there were people that had these wonderful resources, books, platforms, that would help these people that are looking for how do I get civically involved? So we decided to write a workbook and go out there and say, okay, people, we have now a process to be able to get you to the point where you need to be, and we have the tools to be able to help you. So we wrote the entire workbook from what is your story? How is your story important to the issue that you want to talk about? What exactly is the issue? How do you break down the issue so that you're very strategic in how you're talking about the issue? Then who are the people that you need to surround yourself with that are going to help you move the agenda forward? How are you going to get into action, right? What are the pitfalls? What are the good things? And how do you navigate to make sure that what you want to see happen in your community, in your country, in your state, in your county, whatever it may be, that it's happening? We've lost the culture because we haven't been civically engaged. It's time for us to now get re-engaged in a meaningful way, in a thought out way, so that we can say this is what we want for the country. Because right now we've got the globalists saying that this is what they want for our country. And like you said, Ann, we can do everything within our borders. I am perfectly fine saying we are made in America and we're really excited about everything that's happening here in America. But we Americans need to stand up and take that baton and run with it, because we've got a president, love him, but on one side, in one ear, he's got the globalists that are talking to him what they want him to do. And on our side, we need to be speaking just as loud to make sure that President Trump understands exactly what we want. So we wrote the workbook to make sure that our voices are being heard and that we are organized to do the things that we need to do.
Love it. So you guys have an event coming up in a couple of days here, as a matter of fact. Let's bring this up on the screen here. Watchmen Action is coming up this Friday. RC, give us a little rundown on what people can expect. First of all, I love your logo, but I want to know what people can expect.
Yeah, and people have come to us and they've talked about, I want to get involved, I don't know what to do. We solved that part, but the other thing that happens is people do a lot of talking, but there's very little action. So what people can expect over a 2-hour period is to get the tools that they need to effectively tell their story, to be able to frame an issue and break it down properly so they can stay focused. Our friends Scott and Jill Kiley down at Marco Island are doing this right now with the fluoride issue, and they'll be able to start taking action, Ann, before they leave this training Friday night. They will be in action, which is vastly different than what we've become accustomed to on the conservative side of the table. There's a ton of training, but there isn't much follow-up, and there's very little action because people are so inundated with information. They're like, okay, that's great, I guess so. Now what? And
So
before you know it, 30 days have gone by and nothing happens.
believe me, I have been to many of those training sessions. I know exactly what you're talking about. So you bring up great people, Scott and Jill Kiley. I've known them for several years. Phenomenal what they did down in Collier County. They really raised the bar and set the tone for setting, basically every county taking, county responsibility for its people and its protections during the COVID mask mandates. They set up their own county to be a Bill of Rights sanctuary county, a Bill of Rights sanctuary county, meaning take the hand in the Heisman federal government. You are not allowed to tell us that we have to take a shot or wear a mask or stand 6 feet apart. Really phenomenal. Sounds very basic and germane, but at the end of the day, it's really what liberated us when we stood back up and said, we're not going to do what the federal government tells us to do because it's not law. They're not lawful, requirements here. They're mandates. They don't forget it. So give us a specific action that you are hoping to impart upon people. Are you going to be trying to ask your audience? How are you going to come up with an action item that people are going to, take upon leaving your event on Friday night?
So, Ann, here's the great news is the training is action agnostic. So whatever people come in the room with, whether it's life or local government, or they want to change a particular ordinance, doesn't really matter. Whatever they come in with, we're going to help them to fine tune so that when they walk out, the story on why it's important is clear. They've got the issue narrow focused enough where they can take action and people don't have to eat the elephant all in one bite. We're also going to help them understand how to get to the decision makers they need to get to so they can tell that story on the issue that's most important to them. And then we're going to help them with all of the great tools that are out there so they can stack them together, whether it's social media tools or other voice tools or getting onto the right programs or being in the right places. We put all of that together. So when they walk out, or actually, as we say, before they walk out, they're either on the phone or on the computer saying, listen, my issue right now with education is focused on this gender studies foolishness in Lee County, and I'm ready to take action with our city council right now. Here are the 3 reasons why. And this is the thing over time that we've continued to see, that there was a huge leaky bucket. And we said, let's just focus our ministry, Watchmen Action, on solving that problem. If we can get people out the door focused on one thing with a great story ready for action, we solve a ton of problems. And if we do it locally, it's going to spread.
That's the key. We need it to spread because, breaking right now is something that you all may or may not know, but take a look at this headline coming out of the Gateway Pundit. This to me is just, more judicial corruption here. Supreme Court now ordering the Trump administration to immediately unfreeze foreign aid payments with Barrett and Roberts. Amy Coney Barrett, there she goes again. And Justice Roberts siding with the majority. Stunned Alito issues scathing dissent. Let's see. Juliana, you want to comment on this latest coming out of the Supreme Court?
I just don't understand how we have come to the point where the Supreme Court is ruling on things that is out of their jurisdiction. We need to have, we need to have law and order. We need to go back to our founding fathers told us the executive, branch is supposed to do this, right? The electoral branch is supposed to do that. We have gone, everything's been muddied. The water is muddy. We need to come back to being clear as to how our government is supposed to be run.
And can I add something quickly here? This is an important distinction. And you mentioned this earlier in the show when it comes to laws versus executive orders.
Right.
So Trump had to do what he had to do on USAID. The challenge is that Congress created this monster. And so the way that you effectively neutralize it is you've either got to get this thing repealed, revoked, or whatever, but it's a reminder that while he's doing all of these great things, the cover that has to happen is there has to be a path to get these things into law so that they can't be changed. We saw this in Florida where we fought off legalizing abortion barely, right? Because once something gets into the Constitution or becomes a law, it is extremely difficult to remove. Executive orders can be litigated. And as we see with the Supreme Court, not everyone is your friend.
Right.
Right. So it's a reminder to us to say, well, what can I do to help on this? You can help President Trump and remind the administration we need to get these things codified into law or get these things repealed or revoked as quickly as possible. Because I'll tell you, Ann, what's going to happen after the midterms, the Democrats are going to come hard and everything we're trying to stop, they're going to try to do the opposite, get it codified into law so that we can't remove it.
Right. Well, this is where I think we have a real problem in this country, and it does come down to a corrupt judiciary. I was speaking with a friend of mine, Jason Fick, this morning, who's arguably the world's leading expert on Section 230 and understanding that the courts have misinterpreted Section 230 for almost 10 years now. I mean, it's been completely misinterpreted and misapplied. And, he's coming back around to the Supreme Court. He's going hard after the Ninth Circuit right now. And he's got them backed into a corner ostensibly. And he's figured out essentially that the president actually has the power based on judicial corruption to go in and step in and fix the judicial problem. So this is information we just need to get out there. But when I look at this and I see that the court ruled 5-4 with all 3 liberal justices siding with nonprofit groups, well, of course they are, because that's who's been laundering the money. suing to have their funds restored. And then Justice Roberts and Coney Barrett, the two who clearly are wolves in sheep clothing, voted with the majority. Give me a break. For reasons unknown. Oh, I can't wait till we get Doge to figure out what the reasons unknown are.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, I don't know. It's just more of the same barf. But Jeffrey Sachs has said this over the course of time, and most recently he said this about the United States being a lawless country. I just want to get your impression on this.
I regard the United States as the most lawless and dangerous country in the world by far. You cannot believe how much misinformation we get every single day. Because I have advised more than 100 governments around the world, I have seen things with my own eyes. I've seen US CIA coups with my own eyes. Governments lie, but superpowers make super lies. And if you're running the largest war machine in the world, you are going to lie all the time. The entire Iraq war was not because they thought there were weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction was the outcome of a focus group inside the Pentagon. How are we going to sell this war to the American people? Who made the decision 2 days ago that ATACMS can shoot deep inside Russia? Another brilliant move. We don't even know if the President of the United States is compos mentis right now. We have a deep state that takes these decisions, not a word of explanation to the American people. It's all lies. And I've seen it all through my life because I've been advisors to prime ministers and to presidents and to central bank governors and to some of the wonderful people on this panel. And I've seen a lot.
Wow. Where do you start to unpack that? Okay, so let's start with some basics. And Chris Ann Hall, if you have not seen any of her work, folks, she is brilliant at breaking this down. Let's start with the basics. How do we end up in a situation where these three-letter agencies who are beasts of Congress, when they can't get things done that they want to get done legally, they just create an agency that can do it on their behalf, which is why you end up with things like the CIA. A big part of this is that we've forgotten the governance process in a constitutional republic. The federal apparatus is a creation of the states. So we're actually in charge of that. Where we have to start sometimes, Ann, is with the very basics of how this works. If you keep letting the federal apparatus have power, this is what you end up with, unless you speak up and ensure that your local and state representatives are in alignment with the values of a constitutional republic and are good with governance. Because if they were, Ann, if they were, what you just played, Jeffrey Sachs would have said something very different. He would have said something to the effect of the fact that we're a constitutional republic and the states understand their role and their power over a very small federal apparatus is the reason why we're not intervening in places like Iraq or destabilizing countries like Guatemala or stuff like that. This has been going on 80, 90, 100 years plus, right? We've been at this a long time. He would have said something very different. People say, well, look, there's nothing I can do about it. That's not true, right? This is one of the reasons we do the Watchmen Action training. If you understand at a basic level how this thing works and what's important, you can make an impact. And the last administration did so much damage. And even Trump in his first administration, there was so much he didn't know that the deep state was able to continue. This time around, he's basically giving us a window, and it's limited, by the way. We probably have 11 months left or so to really get anything done. What you saw last night in part is that he's ripping the Band-Aid off and saying, here is all the corruption, here's everything that's wrong, here are all the bad actors. But he can only do so much. The question is, what are you going to do about what Jeffrey Sachs just said about where your money's going?
Exactly. And Juliana, again, I reflect on how he basically was relating to his secretaries of different agencies versus Doge, which represents we the people, versus what he's doing as an executive running a corporation. Again, the United States still isn't a corporate. It's still basically a corporation. We haven't restored the republic yet. And I think what Doge represents is that sort of we the people representation of restoring the republic by having the people go in and find the waste, fraud, and abuse, exposing it. And then the executive saying, okay, we're going to cut. And when you keep cutting away at this stuff, the people that support him in his cabinet positions from these various agencies, right? They're looking at their budgets getting cut. Heck, he even, told, Linda McMahon, if you do your job right over the Department of Education, you're going to be out of a job, which is what we need to see with the Federal Reserve, what we need to see with the IRS. Where else do you want to see cuts, Juliana?
I just want to say that I want him to continue the destruction of the corporation is what you're seeing. I mean, everything that you described was that. People think that he's building up the corporation. No, he's bringing the corporation down so that we can be, the constitutional republic we're supposed to be. But if we're going to find the constitutional republic and, undo the Act of 1871, which made us a corporation versus constitutional republic, right? We, the people, need to speak loudly. Because at this point, it's like we're getting choked because the globalists are the ones that are bringing America to that globalist ideal. When we're saying, no, we the people do not want to have that happen, pull us back to being a constitutional republic. What does that mean? And what do we need to do to make sure that that happens? And like RC said, we've got maybe a year. That's it.
Yeah.
We need to have our voices heard to make sure that we go back to becoming a constitutional republic.
That's right. Well, one of the ways that you can do it is to get here on Friday night. If you are in South Florida or you're thinking about making a trip to South Florida, you can fly into Sarasota or Fort Myers would be your closest airports to get over to Venice, Florida, which incidentally is close to where General Flynn has his office. And of course, this great organization, We the People Health and Wellness, down there in Venice on Venice Avenue. It is going to be Friday from 6 to 8:30. You're going to get hands-on training. And you're going to come together. I think you said, dinner is served? Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Dinner?
Turning Point Faith, our friends at Turning Point Faith are doing dinner for us. You come. It's $25 a person, and you get a workbook. We'll have copies of our book, Empowered to Act, which is now a bestseller. We'll have all that available. And Juliana and I are going to spend some time in fellowship with the group, and we're going to come out armed and ready to take the next steps to win all of these battles. As Juliana always says, you win the battle around the 10-block radius, you win everything else. We want to equip as many people as possible as we can Friday night to do just that.
That's incredible. Parting words as we get ready to wrap up here. And Juliana, let's start with you because you both are truly constitutional experts. You cited Chris Ann Hall, who, by the way, I love her. I did put this tweet up here. I want to just give her a little kudos because she is really brilliant. I've seen her speak many times. She's this is, I think, the most recent post that she has of today, talking about her least favorite takeaway from Trump's congressional address was his promise to make killing a police officer an automatic death penalty offense. I wanted to see, RC, if you want to even comment on this, because she says, before anyone jumps to conclusions, I'm not anti-police, but the federal government lacks the authority for this. Do you want to break that down a little bit? Because that was really a breathtaking comment that he made. And I'm not sure that if it's, can the federal government reach into the municipalities and sort of make that declaration?
Yeah, so this is why I love Chris Ann so much, is that she breaks things down. She calls balls and strikes, right? So
Yep.
she is right that the federal government can't do this. But what Trump did is he opened the doors for the municipalities to take a serious look at it. So what should happen now is that every constitutional sheriff should say, you know what? Enough is enough. We do need to deal with this. That happens at the local or the state level or the county level. We need to seriously look into it. So President Trump is right to call it out, but Chris Ann is also right to give us the guidelines on what can and can't happen. And this is the beauty of a constitutional republic, right? The information is right there. You have experts who give it to you. Now, if you want to take action to say, look, I agree that anyone who kills a cop like that in cold blood, yeah, man, capital punishment should be on the table. Who do I talk to? Do I talk to my sheriff? Do I talk to my local chief of police? Do I talk to my state representative? This is the beauty of it. It gets you moving. That's what Trump did last night. He exposed and said, here's everything. Go to it, guys. Now he's looking at us and saying, I can only do so much. The rest is on you.
He's asking, what are you going to do? Remember John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do, what you can do for your country. So this is that moment in time. And again, President Trump, giving praise and thanks to Robert Kennedy. And of course, the Democrats sitting on their hands. It's so amazing to see this come out. We do have a few short months before we go into this election cycle for 2026, where we need to literally sweep the boards. We need a blue flush and a red wave so that we can take all these executive orders and codify it into law that's meaningful and constitutional, while also repealing those that aren't. And one of the ones I want to see, last point to you, Juliana, is the repeal of the Apportionment Act of 1929 so that we can actually get proper representation in Congress, which would actually add thousands of representatives as opposed to the paltry 435 that are clearly bought and owned by various lobbies, APAC for one, and of course, globalist corporations, Pfizer, et cetera. You think we should go that direction?
I think that would be wonderful. I think it's time for us to take that big money out of our government. We should have representatives that are representing our interests, not these corporations, not the big money, right? It's time for America to be represented in the White House.
And Ann, what you propose is biblical, right? The way that we're supposed to govern. Father gave the word to Moses on how things should be governed and it's smaller groups so that there is proper representation. Because right now, if you try to talk to your rep in Congress, nigh impossible because they represent way too many people. If you get apportionment right, there's an infinitely smaller amount of people who can then get to their representative. And I think you've mentioned this before, Ann, in that setup, you don't need everybody in DC. Things can get done remotely and can get done quickly. And again, we go back to the solution for a constitutional republic versus a corporation. There's another one.
Plus term limits.
Plus term limits.
Yay, term limits. All right. Well,
Yes.
listen, you two. Where can folks follow you? What is the best platform for them to reach you? And again, an appeal for Friday night. If you want to learn how to become part of the solution and not sitting on the sidelines, I would highly recommend that you get on over to what the Watchmen are going to be doing down in Venice. So where's the best place for folks to follow you? RC, Juliana?
Yeah, and they can find everything. Thank you so much again for having us on. They can find everything at watchmenaction.org. So it's plural, watchmenaction.org. All the information on us, all the publications, all of our interviews, including this one very soon, are up there along with information for the event Friday night. We encourage you to come out to Venice on Friday night. Please join us for this training if you can. It will certainly be worth your time and your investment, and you will be armed and ready. watchmenaction.org.
Watchmenaction.org. All right. RC, Julianna Ormond, dynamic duo, husband and wife couple who are out saving the country. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. Appreciate you coming by this afternoon.
Thank you, man.
All right. Okay, everybody. Wow. Great couple. My husband and I have had the pleasure of spending time with them one-on-one at certain events over the years, and they are really just tremendous. They really, really love America, and they love what our founding fathers have orchestrated. And unfortunately, we don't love what the federal government has become because it doesn't reflect anything that our founding fathers designed, sad to say. So the time to roar is now. I highly encourage you to get on over to Venice on Friday night. If you're in Florida, it's only $25. You get a meal for that. But more importantly, it's what you're going to take away and the people you're going to meet. Expand your network. This is where we are right now because, again, President Trump cannot do this alone. It's not designed for him to do it alone. It's designed for us to do it right in our local communities. So get off your butt and get out there. And one of the